Good evening and thank you for joining us for our next 9-to-5 talk. We've got Prince with us this evening to talk to us about mission and the arts, which is great. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're really looking forward to it and hope that many of you will be able to join us online. Prince comes with experience in lots of the arts and it's really great to have him with us. I first came across Prince back when he started at 29th Chapter, which is a fair few years ago.
It's a long time ago.
And since then he's been involved in managing dance groups and more recently as a director for Mission with Youth for Christ as well. So really great to have you with us, and we're going to hear a bit more about that later on from Prince. But if you've got any questions that you want to put to Prince, do type them in on Facebook Live and the feeds, and later on we'll be putting those questions to him. So as he's speaking, if there's something that makes you think, actually I want to ask Prince a question about that, do type it in and we'll be putting those questions to him later on. So Prince, thank you, and over to you.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks so much. Hey, thanks for tuning in, and I really hope that this session is going to be interesting. I know Scripture Union does loads of fantastic work with young people across the nation, and I've heard lots about your online work with Guardians of Ancora. And is that right? That's the right, yeah, which is fantastic. And also, like, I know that there's loads of fantastic innovation with sports and also stuff with, not holiday clubs still and youth clubs and all of that kind of stuff. So it's great and exciting to know that as an organisation, you guys are pressing forward with mission and engaging with young people. But what's also really encouraging is this sense of trying to figure out how do we innovate? You know, how do we do things better? How do we reach young people more effectively? And I suppose within the context of art and mission, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So, like Susie said, my background is I, in my early teens, formed a hip-hop group called the 29th Chapter and spent best part of kind of 15 years sort of touring the UK and overseas, sharing the gospel through music, through hip-hop. I think that there's pretty much not a motorway, a service station that we didn't visit across the UK in that journey over the years. And then from there, I went on to, during that time, I was also an artist manager, so managing the 29th Chapter, I've gone on to manage a few other artists and also a dance group called Rebirth, which has been like a real privilege for me. And then in the last kind of like 6 years, I spent a bunch of time really focusing on local mission. The great thing about being in a sort of a international touring band is you get to see lots of things, but you don't necessarily always get to plant and invest locally at home. And so when we finished the band, there was a great opportunity there just to be really focused and intentional about doing that kind of long haul journey with young people at a local level. And so we did that for about 5 years, working with about 20 secondary schools, connecting with schools through performing arts, through music, through dance, and looking for ways to engage young people in conversations around faith and connecting with local churches as well. I then recently did a short stint with a fantastic organisation called Youth for Christ as their director of mission. I know Scripture Union and Youth for Christ are long-term friends, which is a good thing. So what we want to talk about today is mission, and the question is there a space for art in mission? I mean, it's a little bit of a no-brainer. The answer really is it's a very simple yes. So that's it. Thanks for tuning in. Of course, there's a space for arts in mission. You know, art allows us to engage and connect with people in a way that is deep and meaningful. It allows us to connect intellect to engage emotion, feeling, thought. We can engage in subject matter in a way that sort of breaks down barriers. Art and music are incredible. And should we use all of that in order to engage young people to explore and think about faith? Absolutely, why not? It's imperative that we do that in order to make faith accessible to young people. I love the scripture in Psalm 24 verse 1 that says, "The earth is the Lord and everything in it, belongs to him. And art is part of that. And so, hey, why shouldn't we? Of course, we should engage. I think the challenge, the question isn't so much is it, but it's more a question of how. And in this new era, in this society that we live in, how do we do that most effectively? And one of the things that I think is important in terms of really distinguishing our how is to have a great handle on the what and the why. Why is it that it's important, and what is it about it that's really important? And I guess throughout this session, that's kind of what I want us to think about. So we're going to look a little bit at the sort of biblical some biblical sort of ideas about what God's intention for music and for art. And then we're going to talk a little bit about trends in culture at the moment, kind of what's going on in the music industry, particularly the music industry, because that's kind of my key background, and trends in sort of technology. And then we're going to look at like the power of music and how it kind of works in terms of the brain and its ability to sort of connect and communicate. And then what I thought I might do is just talk about, I suppose, some practical thoughts, some reflections in terms of my own experience and time with music and with the arts. So just thinking about the why. So Timothy Keller is a American writer and theologian. He's a pastor, and he speaks a lot about culture and art and its value and importance. And his teaching is really kind of like stuck with me and has really kind of shaped a lot of my thinking around the purpose of art and mission and culture and mission. And he kind of looks at it from this perspective. He looks at Isaiah 60, which is a piece of prophecy that looks at the end times. What's the final destination of God's intention for humanity, and then he kind of parallels that to the same sort of picture in Revelation sort of 20, 21 and 22, that looks at the new heaven and the new earth. And what he kind of says is this. He says that God's eternal destination for mankind is a physical, it's a material destination. The new heaven and new earth that we're all heading to, that mission is all about that time where we will are inviting people to be a part of that and that eternal destination. It's about a material future. We're not going to be orbs of light or sort of ethereal bodies sort of floating around. We're going to be physical, material beings. We will sing and we will dance and we will hug and we will eat, and it will be real. And the earth that God intends to put us on, this new heaven, this new earth that God intends us to dwell in, won't be too dissimilar in its material form to the world that we're in now, in some ways. And in some ways, the Bible says that we've not imagined what God has in store. But what these bits of scripture tell us or indicate that it will definitely be a material world. And so if it is, and because it is a material world, the cultural activity and in all its glorious good will go on forever. Music will exist into eternity, and that is part of God's plan. Art will exist into eternity. So if we go back to Genesis, we see that God put his hands in the soil and he fashioned Adam. And what did he set Adam to do? He gave Adam the task of being a gardener. Now, what does a gardener do? A gardener cultivates or cultures. Another word for cultivate is to culture. What does it mean to culture? Well, it means to take the raw material and to order it in a way that it produces its full potential, that it works to its full potential for the purpose of human flourishing and for the purpose of the flourishing of human society. And so we need beauty, and so there are flowers, and we need food, and so there is vegetation. And that's what cultural activity is. It's taking the raw material and ordering it in a way so that it produces its maximum potential for human flourishing. So we get it in terms of gardening, but let's think about this. Let's think about music. What is music? Well, music is the raw material of sound ordered in a way to make music, to make something that enables us to communicate and flourish and enjoy. What is visual arts? Well, visual arts is taking the raw material of dye and paint and canvas and putting it together to make beauty, to make something that we can behold and engage with and consume and enjoy. What is theatre? Well, theatre is taking the raw material of human experience and language and putting it together to make narrative, to make stories. Human beings can't exist without this stuff. We need stories, we need culture, we need music, we need art, because these things allow us to connect with one another, to connect with God and connect with the environment. They are intrinsic to human flourishing. And so when we think about this eternal future that we will have, all of these things will exist. And God has designed it that we are part of the creation, the curation of these things. We are supposed to be creators of culture. And we will do that now, and we will do that into eternity. And so it's a good thing. So the issue is that if we see art as purely a tool in order to proclaim the gospel, then we lose something of its potential and something of its potency and something of its intended end. And that isn't what God intended. So it's important that we expand our view. And I guess as we think about this, a scripture union and within the 95 community, I really want to encourage you to think about this idea that culture and art and music, absolutely we should use it for the purpose of evangelism, but its power is deeper than that. And its ability to engage and connect and bring life and bring hope and to allow people to be who they are supposed to be is really important. And I guess the other thing that's really important is that sometimes within Christian culture and within missional communities, sometimes people who are, maybe if a young person wants to be a pastor or a minister, we kind of, extol that, and that's great, and we support them, and we kind of know where to signpost them. But for a young person who wants to be an artist or who wants to be a musician, it's almost like we don't attend to that with such value, because we're like, well, it's okay, but it's not going to save anybody. But culture and cultural development is part of God's intended design. So it's important that we see that and that we value it for what it is. So I guess let's think a little bit more about the what. So what I'd like us to think about is trends in culture. So Google in 2016, they did a study on what young people thought was cool, and they interviewed young people from 12 to 18 on what they thought was cool. And you'll be glad to know that music, art, was in the top 5 of what young people thought was cool and what they thought it was important to engage in. Other things that were in the top 5 were media and entertainment and video games. For boys, the top thing was actually video gaming, followed by tech. And for girls, the top thing was clothes and fashion, followed by music. So that's an interesting trend there. In terms of if we look at global music sales, the live music scene has dominated global sales for the last 10 years. Between 2014 and 2017, the live music industry grew from 18 billion to a staggering 20 billion pounds globally. So people want to engage with music. YouTube is by far the biggest streaming platform and the biggest music discovery platform in the world, and it stands above iTunes by a significant amount in terms of engagement. Whilst physical sales over the last 4 years have declined, streaming of music through platforms like YouTube and Spotify has grown substantially. So it has in fact doubled in size. So more and more people are streaming music. People want to engage. People want to consume music. And the UK trends, those are global statistics, the UK trends have followed suit. So people are increasingly consuming music. Music streaming particularly is big business. So let's think about genres. So in the UK and internationally, rock music and pop music have always been the biggest genres. But in 2014, pop overtook rock music and has held that place ever since. And I think that it's important to recognise the growing emergence of genres like grime music. You know, grime music, as something that is indigenous to the UK at the moment, has an international platform. And it's growing, and it's growing exponentially. In the UK alone, streaming of music doubled between 2016 and 2017. This is streaming of grime music. It doubled from 89 million streams to 206 million streams in the year. So the growth in that genre is astronomical. Ticketmaster did a survey. You might have figured I'm interested in grime music. Ticketmaster did a survey of people's engagement with grime, and they found of the 2,000 people that they surveyed, 73%, so that's 3/4 of the people that they surveyed had an awareness of grime music, and 43% of people said that they engaged with, listened to grime music in some way, shape or form. For a new musical art form, that is staggering. I mean, it's not new, grime has been around for a long time, but compared to rock and pop, it's a different beast. But it's staggering, and that indicates a trend in terms of music culture in the UK. If we think of artists like Stormzy and Ed Sheeran, these are indigenous young guys grown from the UK who are having a global impact because of the genre and the style of their music and the way in which they create music that resonates with people. So thinking about tech, another thing that I think it's worth noting is, thinking about trends, another thing that I think is worth noticing is tech. Virtual reality is a really interesting phenomenon that is growing massively in the UK. So in the first quarter of 2017, Sony shipped 2 million units of its virtual reality headset. I mean, the thing sold out. There was queues of people waiting, and other big players in the industry like Samsung and Google and HTC are all vying for a piece of the sort of virtual reality pie. It's interesting to note that the new iPhone has kind of highlighted as one of its key features augmented reality. That's really interesting. Something that's been on the fringes of the sort of tech world and mainstream culture is now moving into a very central space. If you look at the Forbes list of top influencers, in years past it was all kind of, business CEOs of, industry and manufacturing. But, these days that list is full of celebrities and music stars and video game celebrities and online celebrities. There's real shift in trend in the tech world. I think the emergence of platforms like Twitch, which are now generating literally celebrities in the gaming world, is something that we have to recognize. There's a real shift in culture and in the way that young people are engaging with culture and engaging with art. And we have to be aware of these trends in order to try to be as effective as we can in reaching young people. I think the thing is that art within mission has to seek to address and engage with the issues that young people are raising, the issues that young people face, and demonstrate God's love in a way that people can really connect with. I think that when we think about Generation Z, I think that one of the things that is really important to note is that they're a generation that still consume, but more than ever before, they are a generation that create and curate. More than ever, young people in Generation Z have the capacity to create music and to share it with the world. Platforms like Vimeo and like YouTube have given young people a platform to literally create not just consume, but to create and to share their thoughts, their feelings and emotions with the world. And they have become used to and expectant that they will be able to do that. They're able to curate a playlist of music based on their feelings and their emotions and their likes and their dislikes. And that's a really interesting thing for us to have an awareness of. Well, how do we engage with that? How do we place content in their sphere of awareness that they can connect with? Visual arts that used to once be all about the glossy, polished finish, you see now in youth culture has much more of a feel of being a little bit more raw and a little bit more scrapbooky, and is all about kind of that whole feel of what something that could be created by a young person, and young people tend to veer more towards that style of imaging. And so businesses are thinking, well, how can we create stuff that is going to connect with young people in that way? There's loads of shifting trends there that if we're really going to get effective in engaging young people, we've got to kind of think about and be aware of. So let's think a little bit about, I suppose, the brain and how the brain works. What's the whole connection between the arts and that actual visceral engagement with the mind? Well, we kind of know that the brain has two sides. It's got the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and the left hemisphere controls our right hand, and it deals with things like academic qualities, like rationale, like logic, like analytics. It would deal with things like facts and words. And I know I'm kind of like boiling this down to sort of very kind of maybe basic fundamentals, but you kind of know what I mean. And then we've got the right hemisphere that controls the left hand, and that deals with sort of our creativity and processing music and art and spatial awareness and sound and intuition. And what art enables us to do is it enables us to connect with that left. Well, when what music does. So let's think about music. So music is words put into words, ideas, messages put into formatted into a way that makes sense, and then underpinned with a tone, a rhythm that connects with people. So music connects with both sides of the brain, and when we connect with both sides of the brain, something special happens that touches us at a deeper level. And so music is really important and really vital and valuable. And when we think about theatre kind of does the same thing. It allows us to put together ideas, narratives that connect with both sides of the brain and engage a much deeper, much more visceral response, emotional. It allows us to process things in a different way to if we just had something that engages with one side of the brain or the other. So if I give my son a list of times tables and ask him to learn them verbatim, that's a challenge for one side of his brain. But if I give him a tape or a recording of times tables with music behind it, he is able to get it and retain it and kind of learn it much more quickly. And so music and art has that power to allow us to engage at a much more deeper level. And we should make use of that as best we can to really connect with young people. You know, it allows us to kind of, to connect with emotion, to deal with issues that maybe otherwise would be difficult to deal with, to allow young people to express themselves and to express what they're going through. And through that through finding ways that we kind of relate and finding common ground in that expression, we're able to connect and build relationship and present ideas that young people can kind of go, okay, I kind of get that. I see what you mean. And that is really important. We must make the most of music and art as we do that. So I suppose moving on to, I guess, really the sort of practicality is the how. And as somebody who's spent a whole bunch of time, I guess, in lots of different seats, I've been that guy who's on the stage bouncing around doing music and kind of trying to use music in a way that helps young people to really kind of get the gospel. And you know, I've seen it. It's been wonderful where you've kind of explained something to young people through music, and they've kind of the penny has just dropped, because it's like it's said in a way that they can connect with, that they maybe think is cool, and they're enjoying an experience that is affirming and it's fun and all of that kind of stuff. So I've been there, and there's a lot of value in that. I've also been on the other side, where I've worked in schools and invited other people to come and seen the pros and the cons of how that kind of works. And I'm sure that will be the experience. Both experiences might be true for you in your setting now. So I guess I just kind of want to share a few thoughts and reflections about what that has looked like for me. So I think in terms of when we do mission, inviting visiting artists, you know, inviting people that bring skills and expertise in areas that we are maybe not so skilled in, be it theatre groups or dance groups or artists, I think that that's a really important thing. And there's pros and cons to that we need to weigh up. You know, so let's think about some of the cons, you know, some of the pros maybe. So connecting, bringing in a group of dancers or singers or rappers or whatever allows you to connect and engage with new young people, because they're going to bring people that maybe you wouldn't naturally, young people that you wouldn't necessarily connect with you, but you have the opportunity to make a new connection because they like dance or they like rap or they like whatever. It can add profile to the work that you're doing. It can add a dynamism and excitement that sometimes we just need to infuse with our work. It can help us to draw a crowd and to encourage momentum, or to just improve our visibility within an area in terms of our mission. But then there's definitely sometimes cons, you know, sometimes these things can be very character driven, and that's great, but when the character goes, when the big dance group or the big band or whatever leaves, you can find yourself in a place where it's like, oh, okay, the young people aren't necessarily so engaged, so what do we do now? Sometimes the connection can feel like it's with the artist and not with mission, or not with the message, or not with the evangelism, or with your particular organisation. I think that can be one of the cons, and I'm sure there's lots of other pros and cons that you've experienced, and maybe there are things that you might want to message over that we could discuss. A couple of thoughts, I think, for people engaging with the arts through bringing in missionaries or artists. A couple of things that I've always kind of thought are important are these. I think that as an organisation, you need to work extra hard when you bring in a band. I've been in to lots of situations where you get invited by a well-meaning youth group or youth leader or whatever, and you kind of come for a week at school, and it almost seems like it's kind of like a week where the youth team sort of kind of feel like, oh, we can take it a bit easy, like these guys are going to do the stuff. And where I've seen youth leaders take the opposite approach is where I think that there's been the most fruit, where actually the youth leader or youth worker sees it as an opportunity to raise their profile and actually to get super more engaged and have more visibility, and use it as an opportunity to really work hard at making the most of these new connections that are being formed. By being a present face, that's where you find that there's more added value. So I would say, if you're doing that, be ready to work extra hard, be super intentional about being proactive, about being a face that connects with the young people and is around the young people, and don't just leave it to the artist. Make sure that you are, as much as possible, in the centre of that communication piece, be it the assemblies, or be it the lunchtime clubs or the concerts or whatever. I think that it's important that you try to minimise the line between you as a leader or as a youth worker and the visiting artist. Try to have follow-up events. There's loads of ways that we can do kind of follow-up events with, if it's a dance team or an artist. You can do Facebook Live things before and after event like we're kind of doing now. You can be a fan with the young people of the artist and follow the way, what they say, what they do. Use those cues as an opportunity to generate conversation. So it's not just about the moment, it's about the moments before and the moments that follow, where you are actually being a fan with the young person, and hopefully through the content and the lifestyle of that artist, you maybe pick up opportunities to express further the good news that you want to bring to the young person. So use those opportunities, use social media and stuff like that to connect further. I think other things that I'd say are really important are this. I think that quality is key when we're engaging in the arts. Like, young people expect everything to be X Factor quality these days. And when you see a 14-year-old who can sing and dance and perform like they should be on stage at the O2, it just doesn't cut it when you bring in an artist or a piece of art or a piece of creativity that is substandard. They just kind of look and go, well, I can do better. You know, I've got GarageBand. You know, so we have to have a real sense of doing things with quality and being serious about that. And I think also authenticity is key. You know, I think young people can smell when something's not for real, when something isn't grounded in authenticity, you know. And authenticity means bringing the highs and the lows, bringing the ups and the downs. And I think sometimes when we present a gospel that is all up, and we make out that our Christian life is all up, it doesn't really resonate with young people. And so they see through that, and then the art or whatever it is loses something of its impact. And I guess the other thing that I would say that is really important to understand taste and appetite in young people. There's no point trying to bring in a rock band when actually young people are into dance or into grime. And I know that sometimes that can be a real challenge. So it means that we sometimes have to do our homework in finding the right thing that's really going to engage. One of the things that I think is really interesting and important is that there are a lot of artists out there who are Christians who are passionate about using their art to engage in mission. And they are looking for opportunities, they're looking for organisations like Scripture Union, like a Scripture Union local centre, or like, you know, a local church that will partner with them in order to share their music, to share their art, and to share the faith that resonates through that. And I think there's something about looking for opportunities to create partnerships with people of peace. Sometimes it might be a Christian, sometimes it might, I know for a lot of my experience working at a local level with mission in schools and art has been about working with local authorities and with music services and with sometimes local bands who aren't Christians, but creating a space where we can look for the common good in what we're doing and seek a common goal in terms of reaching and engaging young people and bringing our different messages. And that requires some curation and some thought, and it requires some relationship and careful navigation, but it's definitely worth doing. I think that as we think about technology particularly and trend, often we can find ourselves wanting to engage in things that maybe we don't have the expertise to engage in. And that is when it's really important that we step out of our comfort zone and look to seek to make new partnerships and build new relationships and explore new avenues and activities where we can find synergy. I think that the idea that we don't have enough money to innovate in mission through art and through technology doesn't really make sense to me, because that in some senses I think belittles the idea of this great God that we believe that we want to share with others, that somehow seems to get priced out of the market of creativity. That to me doesn't seem to kind of make sense. I think that actually often what we need to do find new ways, and that means being brave and stepping out of our comfort zones and maybe partnering with people that we wouldn't necessarily think are the natural, obvious people to partner with. Just finally, two thoughts. I think in terms of mission at a local level, one of the most effective things that I have found in engaging young people through the arts has been something that's been amazingly simple, and that is creating platforms for young people, creating spaces for them to engage in the arts. I mean, literally creating spaces, like literally offering a room or a basement, or putting on a festival, or creating a platform, a space where young people can come and share their music, where they can be valued, where they can be, their art, their creativity can be celebrated. That has been one of the most powerful tools in terms of engaging and connecting with young people, and then building that trust and authenticity that allows you to then speak into or engage in their lives. The power of that should never be underestimated, and I've seen that as a real effective tool in my own personal ministry. And I think that the last thing that I'd really like to encourage us with is investment. You know, we sometimes, as within Christian ministry, can look for a solution, and we can look to buy in a solution, or to bring in a band, or to find some young people to put on a gap year team. But are we really investing in creativity in young people? Because the future Justin Bieber or the future Ariana Grande may be in our youth group now, and if we choose to invest in them spiritually and in their moral understanding and their understanding of God, but also be intentional about encouraging them in their investment and development in the arts and their sort of creative side, then in the long run our ability to really speak into and connect with and engage with culture will be hugely multiplied, and I think that we'll make a much bigger difference. And I think also that we'll engage with culture in the way that God intended, as we invest in young people, knowing that that culture will exist and go into eternity. And that's the exciting thing about what God wants to do, and that's the exciting thing about arts and culture, that it is God's intended purpose that rides right into eternity, and we have a part to play in creating and culturing and curating that. And so let's do it well. Let's be diligent about understanding the why and the what, and let's allow some of these thoughts to impact our how, and to push us to be more deliberate in our excellence and in our pursuit of doing that how really, really well. So hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that's been helpful, and hopefully we've got some questions, and I hope I can help answer some of them.
We certainly have got some questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Prince, for sharing that with us. Plenty to think about, and if you've got more questions that you want to send in, do type them in on Facebook Live, and we'll be able to put them to Prince. But I've got a few to kick us off. So first one, there seems to be a major shift for organisations to now reach into many schools and to spend only a day in each school compared to the mission weeks we've run with you in Mansfield. Do you think it's better to go to 5 schools with a day each, or be more intentional with a week in one school?
Oh, okay. Wow. Who's that from Mansfield? Who is that? Can you say? Are you allowed to say?
Well,
I guess everybody can see,
he's
right?
Gone there with his name, so Bob Goody. So
Oh, what up, Bob? AKA the good stuff, AKA the goods. We love Bob Goody. Yeah, I mean, a week or a day. I mean, schools are a tough place to get into. I mean, I have worked hard I've spent a lot of time trying to get into schools, and ultimately access to schools is all about relationship, isn't it? If you've ever tried to get into school, you know it's all about relationship, and it's all about persistence. You know, you need to be on the phone, you know, at break time, and on the phone at lunchtime, and on the phone after school, on the phone before school, to try to get that all-important connection with the music teacher or the RE teacher or the deputy head assistant or whatever. And what your ability to access for a school for a day or a week will really depend on that relationship. And let's face it, you're always going to take whatever you can get. I think that if you can be in a school for a week, amazing. You get to have a real depth of relationship, and you get to interact and connect with people in a really special way. And you should always look for that. We should always look for those kind of opportunities. But the reality is that schools are becoming more and more busy. You know, like once upon a time, there used to be, a clear season in the school's calendar where you could get in and put on a missions week and have the school hall designated for you. But more and more schools are focused on obviously the academic achievement, and are being under pressure to make sure that, you know, English, maths, and are the priorities. And so that space for the school mission is being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And that is just a reality that we have to deal with. That's a reality that we have to deal with. And I think it's understanding that the school has an agenda, which is to nurture and to educate young people. And I think where we can add value and where we can have the best opportunity to be in school for as long as we can is where we come up with ideas that allow us to align ourselves with the school's priorities. So when a school's missions week covers topics that are important to the school, or brings in an artist or art, or fashioned around a subject matter like bullying or like, sex ed, things that schools are crying out for, the opportunity for them to then give you more time, more space, and to allow you to have more contact with the young people is, well, they tend to be more forthcoming. So ultimately, you're always going to take what you can get, right? A week in school, if you're in a faith-based school, is amazing. But if all you can get is a day, then hey, who's not going to take a day, 1 day in 5 schools? I think it's down to your relationships.
Great, thank you. Another question. When have you been most surprised by God working through the arts to speak to young people and yourself?
Oh man. When have I been most surprised? God surprises you all the time, doesn't he? I know, like, I was on social media, I was on Twitter yesterday, and there was like a little bit of a storm about Stormzy mentioning God at like an award ceremony, and it was like, oh my goodness, Stormzy is talking about God openly. Wow, it's amazing. Moments like that are like, oh, that's really interesting, actually, that spirituality should enter that mainstream space, and somebody that maybe not everybody would necessarily connect with spirituality. I think that that's really interesting. I think that there have been loads of moments. I remember we ran this thing called like Music Boot Camp, and it was basically like over half-term holidays. It was a space for young people to come and develop their skills in music, and we managed to get loads of fantastic, like high-level musicians, and loads of these guys were Christians. We had like Emily Sandé's drummer, a guy called Jonathan Stewart, who's incredible, and we had a lady called Michelle John, who's been on The Voice, who's incredible, and she was our like main vocal coach. And these Christian guys came and gave like 2 days of their half term to training and equipping young people in music. And through that process, we were just, as Christian youth workers, get to spend time with them around music and build relationships and begin to share some of our faith. And I remember just sitting with a couple of the young people that had come to this, and the conversation kind of opened up, and it was basically a conversation about value. And a couple of these guys had kind of said, they said, oh, my parents said that I was an accident. And I was like, hold up. And we kind of had the opportunity to talk about that and to kind of unpack that and to be able to share the idea. Actually, I don't think anybody's an accident. I think everybody's created, and God has purpose and intention for you. And that would have never happened had we not had this music training program. And I know even with some of those young people, you then listen to their music, and the themes of identity and worth or their lack of identity and worth that came through that music, again, opened up opportunities for conversation. What do you mean by that? Like, why do you think that? And then being able to say, well, hey, look, this is kind of what I think, and I think something a little bit different. And that has been really inspiring and eye-opening.
Brilliant, thank you. You mentioned about the growth of grime music. Mm-hmm. What does grime music tell us about young people, the fact that it's growing? What do you think that tells us about where young people are at, some of the things that are concerning them, or the things they want to talk about?
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I think that, like, Ticketmaster did an amazing piece of research. It was only, was it 2016? Was it recently? It was just highlighted recently. And if you look up Ticketmaster research on grime, And it really looks at the demographic, the geography of where young people are who really, really love grime music. And like East London is like a hotspot, and funnily enough, like West London is like a hotspot. And then there are sort of cities around the UK. Why is it? What is it about grime music? I think there's something about grime music that is indigenous, that young people love. I think for a long time, hip hop has kind of, in terms of youth culture, taken up like a big space, but hip-hop is kind of, I guess, seen by many as like an American import, whereas grime music is really indigenous. I think the thing about grime is that it's very raw, it's very like, could you say honest? It's honest in its complexion, not necessarily honest always in its message. Not everything that grime artists profess to do are things that they're doing, and so that there's maybe a dishonesty there. But I think that there's something about it that is just raw, that young people love, and it's not. It's still emerging into mainstream culture. So there's something about it that's underground, which makes it cool. And I think that it's important that we realise that cool is still important to young people. And I think that those are some of the things, some of the topics that grime music sort of typifies, I think, resonate and really relate to some young people. Not all young people, but some young people. Some young people, I think, just love it because of the sound and because of the vibe and the culture. But I think for some, yeah, definitely the message and the angst and the struggle resonates. And I think that that's really important to recognise, and really speaks to youth culture in a way that I think we need to pay attention to. And sometimes we can, I guess maybe as adult youth workers or missionaries, we can kind of detach ourselves a bit from the culture in terms of the detail of the music and like the sound and like the messages. And when we do that, we kind of lose out because we don't really kind of know what it is that young people are talking about. And so I think it's really important that we engage and that we connect and that we consume these things so that we really kind of are embodied and embroiled in the culture so that we can authentically connect with young people. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. You talked about the two sides of the brain and how the arts connects with both sides, which I thought was really, really interesting. Do you think that God connects with both sides of our brain? And do you think there are things other than the arts that connect with both sides of the brain?
Yeah. I feel like, yeah. Does God connect with both sides of our brain? Well, like the Bible kind of says that God is spirit and those who worship him in spirit and truth. So, like, I guess the thing is God connects at a much deeper level. Of course he connects through our brain and both sides of our brain. You know, you read the Bible and the words, you know, the ideas connect so much deeper when we meet God in worship or we meet God in prayer. He connects with us in a way that connects with both bits of our brain. But I think also we can meet God in music and we can meet God in art. And in a very natural way, he connects with us through our mind, and it also connects with us spiritually and supernaturally. So, yeah, of course. And I think with that, it's probably, there's something about music and about art that is also deeply spiritual, maybe. That enables a connection. It's probably maybe going a little bit off track, but I know like and this is like a little bit off track, and I'm not kind of like saying, hey, this is good, but you know, like in cultures where they practice things like voodoo, you know, things like the beat of the drum and movement and the sound and the whole kind of thing invokes a very spiritual thing that is a darkness, but there's something about that connects past the cognitive side of a person's existence. And so should that surprise us? Probably does surprise us a bit in Western culture. We'll be like, oh, no. But you know, I think African and Eastern culture maybe recognizes that in a way that we we maybe don't. So I guess the short answer is yes, God can, and he does.
Thanks so much, Prince. That was brilliant, and thank you everyone for joining us. Hope that's been inspirational for you, just as it has been for us. So do feel free to watch again, keep on commenting. Prince is in the 95 community, and I'm sure we'll be up for answering any other questions that people have got. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, guys. And yeah, keep innovating and keep using art in great ways to connect young people with Jesus. We must do that.